The crystal chandelier above me fractured light into 1,000 tiny stars across the polished marble floor of the Grandview ballroom. My fingers curved around the stem of a champagne flute I hadn't touched, the glass warming against my palm as I stood at the periphery of wealth I'd only ever served, never inhabited. 1 month. That's how long I'd been James Wilson's executive assistant, managing calendars and correspondence for a man whose silences felt heavier than most people's conversations. The corporate gala sprawled before me like a stage set from another world. Women in gowns that cost more than my yearly salary glided past, their laughter cultured and carefully modulated. Men in tuxedos clustered in groups, their handshakes conveying deals worth millions. I'd dressed carefully tonight in a simple black dress from a consignment shop, elegant enough to not embarrass my employer, modest enough to remain invisible. That was the goal. Blend in, observe, don't draw attention. I'd learned in my brief tenure that James Wilson preferred his staff unobtrusive. He'd had 7 assistants in the 2 years before me, each lasting mere weeks before his exacting standards drove them to resign. I'd studied their exit interviews during my research before accepting the position. Too demanding. Impossible expectations, never satisfied. Cold. The warning should have deterred me, but I'd needed the job desperately, and something about the challenge intrigued me. My first day, James had looked at me exactly once, those dark eyes assessing me with the same attention he'd give a contract clause, then returned to his work without comment. In the 4 weeks since, our interactions remained strictly professional. He communicated through terse emails and brief verbal instructions. I responded with efficiency and precision, anticipating his needs before he articulated them. The dynamic worked. I intended to keep it that way. The ballroom doors opened, admitting a late wave of guests. I recognized several from photographs I'd reviewed in preparation for tonight. Wilson Enterprises business associates, potential partners, carefully vetted contacts. My job was simple. Circulate discreetly, remember faces and names, provide James with a detailed debriefing tomorrow morning. Standard corporate reconnaissance disguised as socializing. Champagne? A server materialized at my elbow, offering a fresh glass from an elegant tray. I'm fine, thank you. I kept my voice low, professional. The server moved on, and I shifted position slightly, gaining a better view of the entrance where James stood greeting arrivals. He wore a tuxedo with the same precision he brought to everything else, the fit impeccable. His dark hair styled back from his angular face. At 31, he commanded attention without effort, his presence making lesser men unconsciously defer. I'd noticed details about him over the past month. How he took his coffee black, no sugar. How he read contracts with his left hand pressed flat against the desk, ring finger tapping occasionally when he encountered questionable language. How his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly when his father called, their conversations brief and evidently strained. How he never smiled. Well. A voice interrupted my observations. Wilson's finally brought someone worth looking at to one of these tedious affairs. I turned to find Patrick Taylor approaching, his expression carrying the entitled confidence of men born into money rather than earning it. I'd seen his file. Venture capitalist. Wilson Enterprises' potential partner on a tech acquisition. Reputation for aggressive negotiation tactics and wandering hands at company events. Mr. Taylor. I kept my tone neutral, polite. Enjoying the evening? I am now. His gaze traveled over me with undisguised appraisal, the kind that made my skin prickle with discomfort. I don't believe we've met. Patrick Taylor. He extended his hand with the expectation I'd take it. I shook briefly, extracting my hand as quickly as courtesy allowed. Kate Roberts. I work for Mr. Wilson. Work for him. Patrick's smile widened. In what capacity? You seem far too lovely to be buried in paperwork. The casual dismissal of my professionalism rankled, but I maintained composure. Executive assistant. If you'll excuse me. Wait. He shifted position, blocking my retreat. I wanted to ask Wilson something, actually. Is she single? The question froze me mid-step. He wasn't even looking at me now. His attention fixed across the ballroom where James had just concluded a conversation and was turning in our direction. Patrick raised his voice slightly, ensuring it would carry. Wilson. Is she single? Your assistant. I'd like to take her to dinner. The ballroom didn't exactly go silent, but conversations nearby stuttered and died as heads turned toward us. I felt heat crawl up my neck, mortification mixing with fury at being discussed like I wasn't standing right there, my mouth open to respond with something cutting, but James reached us first. He moved with that particular grace I'd observed before, economical and purposeful. His dark eyes locked on Patrick with an intensity that made the other man's confident smile falter. Then James looked at me, and something in his expression shifted. Not softening exactly, but changing in a way I couldn't name. She's mine. The words dropped into the space between us like stones into still water. 2 syllables that reverberated through my chest and apparently through James's consciousness simultaneously, because his eyes widened fractionally, the first genuine surprise I'd ever seen him display. The silence stretched. Patrick blinked, confusion crossing his features. Several nearby guests had stopped pretending not to listen, and I stood there, champagne flute forgotten in my hand, staring at my boss who'd just claimed me like property in front of half the city's business elite. Something hot and reckless rose in my throat. The same impulse that had made me apply for an impossible job now made me tilt my chin up and meet James's gaze directly. Jealousy doesn't suit someone who pretends not to notice me, sir. The formal address carried just enough edge to cut. I watched his jaw tighten, that telltale sign of tension I'd learned to recognize. But instead of the ice I expected, something else flickered in his dark eyes. Something that made my pulse jump. Kate. My name in his voice sounded different than it ever had in our professional exchanges. Lower. Careful. A word. Now. Not a request. Never a request with James Wilson. But the heat in his gaze suggested this conversation would be nothing like our usual brief, formal interactions. Patrick opened his mouth to protest, but James turned that Arctic stare on him, and whatever the venture capitalist saw, there made him step back with raised hands. Sure, Wilson, no problem. Didn't realize she was spoken for. Now you do. James's hand found the small of my back, proprietary and warm even through the fabric of my dress. He guided me away from the crowd, toward the French doors leading to the terrace. I should have objected, should have pulled away, should have reminded him that I was his employee, not his possession. Instead, I let him steer me outside into the cool December night, my heart hammering against my ribs for reasons I refused to examine too closely. The terrace was mercifully empty, string lights casting soft illumination over elegant furniture and potted evergreens. The moment the doors closed behind us, muffling the party noise, James released me and stepped back. But not far. Never far enough to feel safe. I apologize. His voice was controlled, but I heard the edge beneath it. That was inappropriate. Which part? I set my champagne flute on a nearby table with deliberate care, buying time to steady my breathing. Claiming ownership of your assistant in front of your business associates, or dragging me out here like I'm in trouble? Both. He moved to the terrace railing, bracing his hands against the stone, the tuxedo jacket pulled tight across his shoulders. I don't know what I was thinking. That's evident. The recklessness still burned in my chest, making me bold. You've barely acknowledged my existence in 4 weeks, Mr. Wilson. I've been invisible. Efficient and invisible, exactly as you prefer your staff. So forgive me if I'm confused about this sudden possessive display. He turned to face me, and the look in his eyes made my breath catch. Not anger, something far more dangerous. You think I don't notice you? The question was barely above a whisper, but it hit me like a shout. I wrapped my arms around myself against the cold, or maybe against the intensity of his attention. You communicate in emails and one-word instructions. You never make eye contact during briefings. You've never asked me a single personal question. So yes, I assumed I was just another piece of office equipment to you. Kate. He said my name again, and this time it sounded almost pained. I notice everything about you. The confession hung between us, stark and unexpected. I stared at him, trying to reconcile this man with the cold, distant employer I'd been working for. He took a step closer, then another, until only a few feet separated us. I noticed that you take your coffee with exactly 2 sugars and a splash of cream. That you organize files by color because you think chronologically but need visual cues. That you bite your lower lip when you're thinking. That you wear your grandmother's locket every day under your blouse. That you smile at everyone in this building except me. Each observation felt like a revelation. I'd thought I was invisible, but apparently he'd been watching me with the same attention to detail he brought to everything else. Then why? Because I employ you. His jaw tightened. Because I'm your boss, and any attention beyond professional interest would be inappropriate. Because I have no right to want what I want. And what do you want? The question escaped before I could stop it. Bold, dangerous, crossing every professional line we'd carefully maintained. But his claim in that ballroom had shattered something between us, and I needed to know if I'd imagined the heat in his eyes, or if this impossible thing was real. James closed the remaining distance between us in one stride. His hand came up to cup my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone with unexpected gentleness. This, he said quietly. I want this. Then he kissed me. Not tentatively. Not carefully. With the same focused intensity he brought to every business negotiation, like he'd been thinking about it for far longer than 4 weeks, and now that the dam had broken, restraint was impossible. His mouth moved against mine with certainty, and I responded without thinking, rising on my toes to meet him, my hands finding the lapels of his tuxedo jacket. The kiss lasted seconds or hours, I couldn't tell. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back with uncomfortable weight. I was kissing my boss. On a terrace. At a corporate event, where anyone could walk out and see us. I started. But James pressed his forehead against mine, his hands still framing my face. Don't. His voice was rough. Don't apologize. Don't tell me this was a mistake. Don't go back to being invisible. Mr. Wilson. James. He pulled back enough to meet my eyes. When we're alone, it's James. The intimacy of his first name felt more dangerous than the kiss. But I was already falling, already past the point of self-preservation. James, I whispered, testing it. What are we doing? I don't know. His thumb traced my lower lip, and I shivered. But I'm done pretending I don't see you, Kate. I'm done pretending that every time you walk into my office, I don't want to pull you into my lap and find out if you taste as good as I've imagined. Heat flooded through me at his words. This was madness, professional suicide, every corporate handbook violation imaginable. But his dark eyes held mine, and I saw something there I'd never expected to find in James Wilson. Vulnerability. 1 month, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You've noticed me for 1 month? Longer. He brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. The interview. You walked into my office, looked at me like I was a puzzle to solve rather than a reputation to fear, and told me you'd be the best assistant I'd ever had. I hired you on the spot and spent the next 3 days convincing myself it was because of your qualifications. And the month since? Torture. The word came out bitter. Watching you work. watching you be brilliant and efficient and completely unaware that you'd gotten under my skin, trying to maintain distance while wanting nothing more than to close it. So you claimed me in front of everyone. I stepped back, needing space to think. That's not professional interest, James. That's possession. I know. He didn't try to close the distance again, giving me room. And I have no excuse except that watching Taylor look at you like you were available made something snap. I'm sorry. The apology should have helped. Instead, it complicated everything further. Because despite the impossibility, despite the power imbalance and professional ethics, despite every rational reason to walk away, I didn't want an apology. I need you to understand something. I wrapped my arms around myself again, suddenly cold. I can't be your assistant and your whatever this is. It's not fair to me and it's not sustainable. Pain flashed across his features, quickly masked. I understand. I'll have HR process your transfer first thing Monday. I didn't say I wanted to leave Wilson Enterprises. The recklessness surged again, making me bold. I said I can't be both. So you choose, Mr. Wilson. Keep your perfect assistant who remains professional and invisible, or see where this impossible thing leads. But you don't get both. I moved past him toward the terrace doors, needing to escape before I said something even more dangerous. His hand caught mine, stopping me. Kate. I looked back. His expression was raw in a way I'd never seen, all his careful control stripped away. I choose you. 3 words that changed everything. Monday morning arrived wrapped in the kind of winter sunshine that made Manhattan's glass towers gleam like promises. I stood in my small apartment's bathroom, staring at my reflection and wondering if I looked as different as I felt. The weekend had passed in a strange suspension of reality. James hadn't called or texted, and I'd spent 48 hours oscillating between certainty that Friday night had been a beautiful mistake and terror that I'd actually have to face the consequences of my ultimatum. My phone buzzed as I applied lipstick. A message from an unknown number, though I somehow knew who it was before I even read it. Don't come to the office today. I'll send a car at 10 a.m. We need to talk properly. James. I stared at the text, my heart performing complicated gymnastics. The presumption should have annoyed me. Just another command from a man used to absolute obedience. But the "we need to talk properly" softened it, suggested this was negotiation rather than decree. Where are we going? I typed back. Somewhere we won't be interrupted. Trust me. Trust. Such a simple word. Such complicated implications. But I found myself texting okay before I could overthink it. Then spent the next 2 hours trying on and discarding outfit after outfit before settling on a navy dress that split the difference between professional and approachable. The car arrived precisely at 10. Not a corporate sedan, but a sleek black vehicle with tinted windows and a driver who opened the door without speaking. The interior smelled of leather and something expensive I couldn't name. As we pulled into traffic, I noticed we were heading uptown, away from the financial district. My phone buzzed again. Thank you for coming. I know this is unconventional. Everything about this is unconventional, I replied. Where are we going? My apartment. Before you panic, my housekeeper is there. This isn't a seduction attempt. I just need privacy for this conversation. The apartment turned out to be a penthouse overlooking Central Park, all clean lines and floor-to-ceiling windows. The housekeeper, a professional woman in her 50s who introduced herself simply as Margaret, greeted us with coffee service already prepared in the living room, then discreetly vanished. James stood by the windows, still in his suit despite it being mid-morning. He looked like he hadn't slept well, fine tension visible in his shoulders. Thank you for coming, he said, not turning from the view. You keep thanking me. I set my purse on a chair, moving closer, but maintaining distance. Like you expected me to refuse. I would have understood if you had. He finally turned, and the vulnerability in his eyes matched Friday night. What I did at that gala was unforgivable. Claiming you publicly, putting you in an impossible position. You would have been entirely justified in filing a complaint with HR. Is that what you think I want? To file complaints? I crossed my arms, suddenly irritated. I'm not some helpless employee, James. I made my own choice Friday night. I kissed you back. I gave you an ultimatum. Stop acting like I'm a victim of your terrible behavior. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile, but close. You're angry. I'm confused. I moved to the windows, needing to look at something other than him. You spend a month pretending I don't exist, then claim me like property, then reveal you've been watching me the entire time. Now you bring me to your home for some mysterious conversation that apparently requires complete privacy. So yes, I'm a little angry and very confused. I brought you here because I need you to understand what choosing me means. His voice was carefully controlled. And because I need to know if you're sure. I turned to face him. I wouldn't be here if I wasn't sure. You don't know everything. He moved to the coffee service, pouring 2 cups with practiced ease. About me. About my life. About what being with me entails. So tell me. I accepted the cup he offered, our fingers brushing briefly. Start with why you have 7 assistants in 2 years who couldn't handle working for you. His mouth quirked slightly. You researched me. Of course I researched you. I research everything. I sipped the coffee. Perfect, naturally. And waited. James was silent for a long moment, seeming to choose his words carefully. Wilson Enterprises is successful because I demand perfection. But there's another reason my employees don't last. They discover things they shouldn't. Ask questions they shouldn't. Notice patterns in my schedule and contacts that don't add up to legitimate business. My pulse quickened. What kind of patterns? The kind that get people fired when they dig too deep. His eyes held mine. I'm very good at what I do, Kate. Both the legal aspects and the less legal ones. The confession hung between us, weighted with implications. I should have felt afraid, should have made excuses, and left. Instead, I felt that strange recklessness again, the same impulse that had made me challenge him Friday night. I'm not naive. I set my coffee down with deliberate care. I know Wilson Enterprises operates in gray areas, the offshore accounts and the financial records, the business partners with questionable backgrounds, the meetings you take in cash-only establishments. I'm your assistant, James. I see everything. His expression transformed from guarded to shocked. You knew? I suspected from day one. You confirmed it just now. I moved closer, tilting my head to study him. Did you think I'd run screaming or file reports to authorities? I thought you'd do the smart thing and distance yourself. His hand came up to cut my face, thumb brushing my cheekbone. Instead, you're standing here looking at me like I'm still worth choosing. Maybe I'm not as smart as you think. I leaned into his touch, letting my eyes close briefly. Or maybe I see something in you that you don't see in yourself. Kate. My name was almost a prayer. I'm not a good man. I don't need you to be good. I opened my eyes, holding his gaze. I need you to be honest. With me, with yourself. Can you do that? The kiss was his answer, and this time there was no public event to interrupt us. His mouth moved against mine with the same certainty as Friday night, but deeper, more thorough. His hands slid into my hair, tilting my head for better access. I rose on my toes, wrapping my arms around his neck, tasting coffee and something uniquely James. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against mine. I need to tell you something else. His voice was rough. About the company, about me. Okay. I tried to step back to give him space, but his hands on my waist kept me close. I'm not just an entrepreneur who bends rules. Wilson Enterprises is legitimate, but it's built on a foundation that isn't. My father. He paused, jaw tightening. My father was part of an organization, East Coast Operations. When he decided to retire, I inherited not just his business, but his connections, his obligations. Understanding dawned cold in my chest. The Mafia. We don't call it that anymore. The ghost of a bitter smile. But yes, I've spent the last 5 years transitioning everything legitimate, building real businesses, distancing myself from the old ways. But some connections can't be severed. Some obligations remain. Is that why Patrick Taylor backed off so quickly Friday night? The pieces clicked together. He recognized what you are? He recognized what claiming you publicly meant. James's hands tightened on my waist. In my world, when a man claims a woman in front of witnesses, it's a declaration. It means she's under his protection, untouchable. Mine. The possessive pronoun should have bothered me. Instead, it sent heat curling through my stomach. And if I hadn't given you an ultimatum? If I'd just pretended Friday night didn't happen? I would have respected your choice. His dark eyes held mine. But I would have watched you every day, wanting what I couldn't have, until one of us broke. So you chose me to avoid torture? I couldn't quite keep the edge from my voice. I chose you because the thought of anyone else touching you, looking at you, being with you, made me want to burn the entire city down. The raw honesty in his confession stole my breath. I chose you because in 1 month, you became essential in ways that have nothing to do with your professional competence and everything to do with who you are. You barely know who I am. Then let me learn. His thumb traced my lower lip. Let me take you to dinner. Let me ask you the personal questions I've been avoiding. Let me figure out how we navigate this impossible thing. I should have said no. Should have insisted on more time, more space, more clarity about what this was. Instead, I heard myself say, okay. His smile was small but genuine. The first real smile I'd seen from him. It transformed his face completely, making him look younger and infinitely more dangerous to my carefully guarded heart. Tonight, he said. I'll pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable. This won't be a corporate dinner. Where are we going? Somewhere you can be you, not my assistant. He kissed me again, brief and sweet. Somewhere I can be me, not your boss. The car returned me to my apartment at noon. I spent the afternoon in a strange daze, touching my lips where he'd kissed me, replaying every word of our conversation. The smart thing would be to call this off, to find a new job, to protect myself from the inevitable heartbreak of falling for a man who lived in a world of shadows and dangerous obligations. But I'd never been particularly good at doing the smart thing. At 6:30, I dressed in jeans and a soft sweater, leaving my hair down and makeup minimal. If James wanted the real me rather than the professional facade, this was it. The buzzer sounded precisely at 7. He stood in my building's lobby wearing jeans and a dark Henley, looking nothing like the polished executive I'd worked for. His hair was slightly mussed, like he'd run his hands through it repeatedly. When he saw me, his expression softened into something warm and intimate. You look beautiful. You look different. I grabbed my coat. Younger, less terrifying. Is that disappointment I hear? He helped me with my coat, his hands lingering on my shoulders. Curiosity. I turned to face him. I'm seeing a side of you I didn't know existed. That's the point. He laced his fingers through mine, the casual intimacy both thrilling and terrifying. Come on. I want to show you my favorite place in the city. The place turned out to be a small Italian restaurant in Brooklyn, family-owned and completely unpretentious. The owner greeted James with familiar warmth, ushering us to a corner table without waiting for a reservation. Over pasta and wine, James told me about growing up in his father's shadow, about choosing legitimate business as rebellion rather than obedience, about the loneliness of being feared rather than known. I told him about my grandmother's locket, about studying business management on scholarships, about the desperate need to prove myself in a world that constantly underestimated me. We talked until the restaurant closed around us, and when James walked me back to my apartment building, the kiss goodnight felt like a beginning rather than an ending. "Tomorrow," he said against my lips, "we figure out the logistics, how this works professionally." But tonight was just us, just James and Kate. "I like us," I whispered, "just James and Kate." His smile was everything. And when I finally climbed the stairs to my apartment, I knew with absolute certainty that I was already too far gone to protect my heart. 3 weeks passed in a strange double life that left me breathless and confused in equal measure. During business hours, I remained James's executive assistant, efficient, professional, invisible in the ways that mattered to Wilson Enterprises operations. But the moment office doors closed, I transformed into something else entirely. Kate, not Miss Roberts. His Kate, as he'd taken to calling me with a possessiveness that should have alarmed me, but instead made my stomach flip. We were careful, excruciatingly, frustratingly careful. No public displays, no lingering touches in the office, no indication that our relationship had shifted from professional to intimately personal. James hired a new assistant, Maggie Davies, a competent woman in her 50s who handled his schedule with brisk efficiency, while I transitioned to a newly created strategic analysis position. The promotion came with a raise and an office on a different floor, eliminating any appearance of impropriety while keeping me within Wilson Enterprises' infrastructure. It was clever, calculated, exactly the kind of solution I'd expect from a man who'd spent years navigating dangerous waters. But tonight, sitting across from James at his dining table, while his housekeeper served dinner with practiced discretion, I finally voiced the concern that had been growing for weeks. "We need to talk about what this is." James set down his wine glass, his dark eyes assessing me with the same attention he gave to contracts. "All right. What do you want to know?" "Everything." I pushed my plate away, appetite vanished. "We've been doing this dance for almost a month now. Dinner dates, late-night conversations in your apartment, kisses that stop before they go too far. But we haven't actually discussed what we're doing or where this is going. What do you want it to be?" The question shouldn't have surprised me. James had a habit of turning inquiries back on me, forcing me to articulate desires I'd rather leave unspoken. But after weeks of this careful choreography, I was done with evasion. "I want honesty. Complete honesty. Not the edited version you've been feeding me." I stood, moving to the windows that overlooked the city. "You told me your father was connected to organized crime. You told me you're transitioning to legitimate business. But you haven't told me what that actually means. What dangers still exist. What obligations you can't escape." I heard him move behind me, felt his presence before his hands settled on my shoulders. "You're right." His voice was quiet, measured. "I've been protecting you by keeping certain details vague, but that's not fair to you. So tell me." I turned in his arms, tilting my head back to meet his gaze. "Tell me everything." James was silent for a long moment, his jaw tightening with the tension I'd learned to recognize. Then he took my hand, leading me to the sofa where we'd spent countless evenings talking about everything except the elephant between us. 5 years ago, when my father retired, I inherited his position in what people call the syndicate, East Coast operations, primarily New York and Boston. It's not like the movies. We don't run protection rackets or peddle drugs. It's more sophisticated now. Money laundering through legitimate businesses, strategic acquisitions that consolidate power, influence over unions, real estate, certain political circles. I listened without interrupting, letting him speak. I've spent these 5 years systematically dismantling everything illegal while building legitimate enterprises. Wilson Enterprises is completely clean. I made sure of that before I ever hired you. But there are still connections I can't sever. Obligations to old partners. Debts owed by my father that I'm expected to honor. Like what? Like attending certain meetings, facilitating certain introductions, turning a blind eye to certain activities. His hands tightened on mine. Nothing that compromises my legitimate business, but enough that I'll never be completely free of that world. And the danger? The question I'd been avoiding. The reason your previous assistants left when they learned too much. There are rival organizations, old grudges, people who resent my transition to legitimacy because it threatens their own operations. His expression was grim. Anyone close to me becomes a potential target. That's why I've been careful with you, Kate. Why I've kept you at arm's length even while wanting you close. Why claiming you publicly was simultaneously the most dangerous and the most protective thing I could do. Understanding clicked into place. Because making it clear I'm yours means anyone who touches me answers to you. Exactly. His thumb traced circles on my palm. In my world, that declaration carried weight. It told everyone who matters that you're under my protection. Untouchable. But it also marked you as mine. And there are people who would see you as leverage against me. The reality settled cold in my chest. I should have felt terrified. Should have run immediately. Instead, I felt something else. A strange calm that came from finally understanding the full picture. Why me? The question emerged quieter than intended. You could have anyone, James. Women who understand your world. Women who come from families like yours. Why choose me and all these complications? He stood abruptly, moving to the windows like he couldn't sit still any longer. For a long moment, he just stood there, backlit by city lights, his shoulders rigid with tension. Can I tell you something? His voice was rough. About the first time I saw you? I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. You walked into my office for that interview wearing a suit from a department store and determination that could cut glass. You looked at me like I was a puzzle to solve rather than a reputation to fear. Everyone else who'd interviewed treated me with either fawning deference or barely concealed terror. But you? You sat down, crossed your legs, and told me exactly how you'd revolutionize my filing system and why my current calendar management was inefficient. Despite the heaviness of our conversation, I smiled slightly. I remembered that interview, my desperation for the job warring with my inability to kiss ass, even when it would have been smart. I hired you on the spot because I recognized something in you. That same thing I see every time I look in the mirror. Someone fighting tooth and nail to prove they're more than people assume. More than where they come from. More than the limitations others try to impose. He turned to face me, and the expression on his face made my breath catch. You're brilliant and fierce and completely unaware of your own power. You challenge me in ways no one else dares. You see through my careful control to the person underneath. And when I'm with you, I'm not the cold businessman or the crime boss's son or the man everyone fears. I'm just me. Someone who can be vulnerable without it being used against me. The confession hung between us, raw and honest. I stood, moving to him, needing to close the distance. I'm afraid, I admitted. Not of you, but of what this means. The danger, the complications, the impossibility of normal. I'm afraid too. His hands cupped my face with infinite gentleness. I'm afraid I'll fail to protect you. I'm afraid my past will destroy what we're building. I'm afraid that one day you'll wake up and realize you deserved someone whose life doesn't come with death threats and dangerous obligations. Stop telling me what I deserve. I pressed my palms against his chest, feeling his heartbeat under my fingers. Let me decide that for myself. Kate, I choose this. The words came out firm, certain. I choose you, complications and danger and impossible circumstances included. But I need you to promise me something. Anything. No more protecting me through omission. If there's danger, you tell me. If there's a threat, you warn me. If there's something I should know, you share it. I'm not some delicate thing that needs shielding. I'm your partner, and I need you to treat me like one. Something shifted in his expression, surprise mixing with respect, and something deeper I couldn't name. Partners? He repeated, testing the word. Not just the woman I'm seeing? Partners. I held his gaze. In everything. That's my condition, James. Complete honesty, complete trust. Or we end this now before we're both in too deep. His laugh was sudden and genuine. Kate, I've been too deep since that interview. Maybe even before, in some cosmic sense I don't understand. Then he was kissing me, and this time there was no careful restraint. His mouth moved against mine with desperate certainty, his hands sliding into my hair, tilting my head for better access. I responded with equal fervor, rising on my toes, wrapping my arms around his neck, tasting wine and something uniquely James. The kiss deepened, shifted, became something more than simple desire. It tasted like promise, like commitment, like two people jumping off a cliff together and trusting they'd figure out how to fly. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, James rested his forehead against mine. Move in with me. The words were barely whispered, but they hit me like a shout. I pulled back to look at him, searching his expression for signs of impulsive insanity. James, we've been dating for 3 weeks. 4 weeks and 2 days. His thumb traced my lower lip. And I've wanted you in my space, in my life, in my bed. Since the moment I met you. I'm done with half measures, Kate. I'm done with you leaving at midnight. I'm done with stolen moments when what I want is every moment. So move in with me. Let me wake up next to you. Let me come home to you. Let me build this properly instead of in careful, controlled increments. It was insane, reckless, moving too fast by every rational measure. But when I opened my mouth to say something sensible, what came out was, okay. His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. Okay? Okay. I laughed, dizzy with the recklessness of it. On one condition, I keep my apartment for 6 months. If this disaster crashes and burns, I need somewhere to retreat and lick my wounds. It won't. His certainty was absolute. But I'll pay your rent for 6 months if it makes you feel safer. That's not necessary. Partners, he reminded me, using my own word. Partners support each other. Let me do this, Kate. I surrendered, because arguing felt less important than kissing him again. We spent the rest of the evening planning logistics, making decisions about space and boundaries, and how to navigate this new reality. By the time I left his apartment, our apartment, I'd have to start thinking of it that way, dawn was breaking over Manhattan, and I felt simultaneously terrified and more alive than I'd ever been. Moving in with James Wilson was either the best or worst decision of my life. I suspected I wouldn't know which until it was far too late to turn back. The transition happened with the same efficiency James brought to everything else. Within a week, half my belongings had migrated to his penthouse. Our penthouse, I reminded myself, though the concept still felt surreal. He'd cleared space in his closet with casual ease, making room for my far more modest wardrobe beside his collection of impeccable suits. My books found homes on shelves previously occupied only by business texts and financial journals. My coffee maker, ancient and temperamental but beloved, earned a spot on the kitchen counter beside his sleek espresso machine. Margaret, the housekeeper, adapted to my presence with professional grace, asking my preferences for tea and learning my schedule without comment on the sudden cohabitation. If she had opinions about her employer's love life, she kept them carefully hidden behind her efficient demeanor. The first morning I woke in James's bed, our bed. I lay still for several minutes, listening to his steady breathing beside me, trying to absorb the reality of what I'd done. Moved in with a man I'd known for less than 2 months. Committed to a relationship with someone whose life included dangers I couldn't fully comprehend. Abandoned every careful plan I'd made about building my career slowly, safely, without romantic complications. "You're thinking too loud." James's sleep-rough voice interrupted my spiraling thoughts. His arm tightened around my waist, pulling me back against his chest. I can practically hear the gears turning. Just trying to figure out if I've lost my mind. Probably. His lips pressed against my shoulder, warm through the thin silk of the nightgown he'd bought me. One of dozens of small luxuries he kept introducing into my life despite my protests. But if it helps, I lost mine first. I turned in his arms to face him. In the early morning light, with his hair mussed and his face soft with sleep, he looked younger, more vulnerable. Nothing like the cold businessman who'd interviewed me months ago. "No regrets?" I asked, needing to hear it. "Not one." His hand cupped my face with that gentleness that always surprised me, given his reputation for ruthlessness in business. "You?" Before I could answer, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. He ignored it, keeping his attention fixed on me, but it buzzed again, then again. The insistence suggested urgency. "Answer it," I said, resignation settling in my chest. This was our reality. Emergencies and obligations that wouldn't wait for convenient timing. James grabbed the phone, his expression shifting from annoyed to tense as he read the screen. "I need to take this. It's Christopher. Christopher Evans." I'd learned the name over the past weeks as James gradually introduced me to the players in his complicated world. A rival family's second son, known for aggressive expansion and a particular talent for finding people's pressure points. James kissed me briefly before rolling out of bed and walking to the windows to take the call. I watched his shoulders tighten, his jaw clench with familiar tension as he listened to whatever Evans was saying. The conversation was brief, conducted in those careful, neutral tones that meant danger. "I need to meet him tonight." James returned to bed, but didn't relax, sitting against the headboard with tension vibrating through his frame. "There's a situation developing. Territorial dispute that could escalate if we don't handle it correctly." Define, handle it correctly. His eyes met mine, and I saw the war between protection and honesty playing out behind them. I'd made him promise complete transparency, and now he was testing whether I'd meant it. "There's a shipping operation we both have interests in. Evans thinks I'm trying to edge him out. He's threatening retaliation unless we renegotiate terms." "And by retaliation, you mean?" "Violence, probably. Maybe against our legitimate business holdings. Maybe against people I'm associated with." His hand found mine, lacing our fingers together. "That's why I need to meet with him. Show we're willing to negotiate. De-escalate before it becomes something worse." "Take me with you." James's expression transformed to shock, then adamant refusal. "Absolutely not. Kate, these meetings aren't social occasions. They're dangerous." "Exactly, which is why I should be there." I sat up, pulling the sheet around myself. "You told me claiming me publicly was protective because it established I was yours. But if I'm never seen with you, if I'm always hidden away, how does that protection actually work?" "It works because people know hurting you means answering to me." His voice carried an edge of warning. "You don't need to be physically present for that." "Maybe not. But I need to understand your world if we're going to make this relationship work. I need to see what you deal with, not just hear about it secondhand." I squeezed his hand. "Partners, remember? Complete honesty, complete trust. That goes both ways." For a long moment, James was silent, his dark eyes searching my face for something I couldn't name. Then he exhaled roughly, running his free hand through his hair. "This is a terrible idea." "Probably. But you're going to say yes anyway, aren't you?" His smile was reluctant but genuine. "You're impossibly stubborn. Has anyone ever told you that?" "You hired me specifically because I'm stubborn. Don't complain now." The meeting took place that evening in a restaurant I recognized from James's previous business dinners. But this time, the private room in the back carried different weight. Christopher Evans sat at the head of the table with two men I assumed were bodyguards flanking him. His expression was carefully neutral as James and I entered, his pale eyes assessing me with uncomfortable intensity. "Wilson, I didn't realize this was a social call." Evans's voice carried false pleasantry. "It's not. My girlfriend wanted to understand my business better. I saw no reason to exclude her from a simple negotiation." James's hand settled on the small of my back, possessive and protective. "Girlfriend." Evans' smile didn't reach his eyes. "How domestic. Does she know what kind of business we're really discussing?" "I know enough." I kept my voice steady, despite my racing pulse. "James told me there's a territorial dispute over shipping operations. Seems like something rational people could resolve through conversation rather than threats." Evans's attention sharpened on me, calculating. "Rational. Interesting word choice. Tell me, miss." "Roberts. Kate Roberts." I met his gaze directly, refusing to show the fear curling in my stomach. "Miss Roberts, do you know what happens when people interfere in matters they don't understand?" "I imagine they get hurt." I kept my expression neutral, but I also imagine that smart businessmen recognize when escalation costs more than compromise. Retaliation is expensive, in resources, in attention from law enforcement, in damaged relationships with mutual associates. A renegotiated contract seems simpler. Something flickered in Evans's expression. Surprise, maybe, or reluctant respect. Beside me, I felt James's hand tighten on my back, though whether in pride or panic, I couldn't tell. "You have an interesting girlfriend, Wilson." Evans leaned back in his chair. "Educated in business?" "Strategic analysis." I didn't elaborate, letting him draw his own conclusions. The conversation shifted then, moving into actual negotiation territory. I remained mostly silent, observing dynamics and power plays as James and Evans circled each other verbally, testing boundaries and establishing terms. What struck me most was how similar it was to legitimate business negotiations I'd observed. The same careful language, the same strategic concessions, just with higher stakes and more dangerous consequences for failure. By the time we left 2 hours later, James had secured a compromise that gave Evans expanded territory in exchange for reduced percentage takes on shared operations. It wasn't everything either man wanted, but it was workable, a foundation for peace rather than war. In the car back to the penthouse, James was silent for several long minutes. I watched the city lights blur past the tinted windows, trying to process what I'd just witnessed. "You could have gotten yourself killed." His voice was quiet, but carried an edge of fury I'd never heard directed at me before. But I didn't. I turned to face him. I helped, actually. Evans respected me speaking up. It shifted the dynamic. Or it made you a target. James's jaw was tight. "Kate, these people aren't rational businessmen you can analyze like a case study. They're dangerous. They see weakness and exploit it. They see something valuable and try to take it. Is that what you think I am? Valuable?" The question came out sharper than intended. "You're everything." The confession was raw, which is exactly why I can't lose you to my own stupidity. Bringing you tonight was a mistake. Stop. I reached for his hand, forcing him to look at me. Stop protecting me from your life while claiming we're partners. You can't have it both ways, James. Either I'm in this completely, with full understanding of the dangers and complications, or I'm just another person you need to shield. Which is it? His expression was anguished in the dim light. I don't know how to do this, how to let you in without putting you at risk. Then we figure it out together. I laced our fingers together. But you don't get to decide unilaterally that I'm too delicate for your world. I'm stronger than you think. I know you are. His thumb traced circles on my palm. That's what terrifies me. When we arrived back at the penthouse, James pulled me close the moment the elevator doors closed, his mouth finding mine with desperate intensity. The kiss tasted like fear and frustration, and something deeper. The terror of loving someone in a world where love could be weaponized. We made love that night, with an urgency that felt like claiming, like reassurance, like two people trying to convince themselves that this impossible thing could actually work. Afterward, tangled together in sheets that cost more than my first car, I listened to James's heartbeat slow as he drifted toward sleep. I meant what I said earlier. His voice was drowsy but firm. You're everything, Kate, which means I'll spend every day trying to be worthy of the trust you've placed in me. You already are, I whispered, though I wasn't sure if he heard me before sleep claimed him. I lay awake long after, watching city lights paint patterns on the ceiling, trying to ignore the cold certainty settling in my chest. Tonight had shown me the reality of James's world. The danger, the careful navigation of violence, the constant threat assessment. And while I'd meant every word about being partners, about choosing this life with him, I couldn't quite silence the small voice asking if love was enough to survive in a world built on power and fear. Outside, the city hummed with its usual nighttime symphony. Somewhere out there, Christopher Evans was making calculations of his own. And in the safety of James's arms, I tried not to think about what those calculations might mean for us. 6 months passed in a blur of normalcy, punctuated by reminders that my life was anything but typical. I settled into the penthouse fully, my initial caution about keeping my old apartment gradually fading as James's space became genuinely ours. I learned his routines, his preferences, the small rituals that made up our domestic life. Coffee together each morning before he left for the office. Late dinners where we discussed our days with careful omission of details too dangerous to speak aloud. Weekends spent in comfortable silence, reading or working side by side, or exploring the city together like normal couples. But normal was an illusion we both maintained through deliberate effort. Because underneath the surface domesticity, James's world continued spinning with its own dangerous momentum. I'd become familiar with the players, the rivals who circled Wilson Enterprises looking for weakness, the old family connections James couldn't completely sever, the legitimate business partners who suspected, but never confirmed what they were really dealing with. I learned to read the tension in James's shoulders when certain names appeared on his phone, learned which meetings he came home from, exhausted versus energized, learned the difference between productive negotiation and dangerous standoff. And gradually, I'd carved my own space in his empire. My strategic analysis position at Wilson Enterprises had evolved into something more substantial. I reviewed contracts for potential pitfalls, identified business opportunities, advised on acquisitions and partnerships. James consulted me increasingly on decisions both legitimate and borderline, valuing my outside perspective and analytical approach. You see patterns I miss, he'd told me one evening, reviewing a particularly complex real estate deal, because you're not trained to think like them. You think like a scholar analyzing systems, rather than a player within the game. It makes you dangerous in the best possible way. Dangerous. The word followed me everywhere lately. It was a Thursday in late June when everything shifted. I was working from home, reviewing quarterly reports for Wilson Enterprises' shipping subsidiary, when my phone rang with an unknown number. Hello? Miss Roberts. The voice was cultured, male, unfamiliar. My name is Lawrence Blackwood. I'm an attorney representing certain interests that overlap with Wilson Enterprises. I sat straighter, immediately alert. James had taught me to be wary of unexpected calls, especially from lawyers. I'm not authorized to discuss Wilson Enterprises business without Mr. Wilson's consent. This isn't about business, it's about you. A pause. Specifically, your relationship with James Wilson and what that relationship means for your safety. Cold prickled down my spine. I don't know what you're implying. I'm implying nothing. I'm stating facts. Papers rustled in the background. You've been living with Mr. Wilson for 6 months. You've been seen with him at various business functions. You've even attended at least one meeting with Christopher Evans, a known competitor in Wilson's less legitimate operations. This makes you a person of interest to several parties. Get to the point. I kept my voice steady through sheer willpower. The point is that people close to powerful men become targets, Miss Roberts. Leverage to be used, bargaining chips, and you, with your lack of family connections or protective resources, make a particularly vulnerable target. Unless, of course, you'd prefer to reconsider your association with Mr. Wilson before that vulnerability is exploited. Is this a threat? Consider it. Friendly advice from concerned parties who would prefer to avoid unnecessary conflict. The smile was audible in his voice. James Wilson has made enemies through his transition to legitimate business. Those enemies are always looking for pressure points. Don't make yourself one. The call disconnected before I could respond. I sat frozen, phone still pressed to my ear, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was different from vague warnings about danger. This was specific, targeted. A direct threat disguised as concern. I should have called James immediately. Should have told him about Blackwood's threat and let him handle it with whatever resources he commanded. Instead, I sat at his desk, staring at the phone, trying to process the implications. 6 months ago, I'd chosen this life with open eyes. I'd insisted on being partners, on full transparency about dangers and obligations, but hearing those dangers articulated by a stranger, being told explicitly that my relationship with James made me a target, brought the abstract threat into sharp, uncomfortable focus. The penthouse door opened. James's voice called out, earlier than usual. "Kate, are you home?" I found my voice. "In your study." He appeared in the doorway, taking one look at my face and immediately crossing the room to kneel beside my chair. What happened? I told him about Blackwood's call, watching his expression transform from concern to cold fury. By the time I finished, his jaw was tight enough to crack teeth. Lawrence Blackwood works for the Mitchell family, Boston operations. James's voice was dangerously quiet. They've been trying to muscle into New York territory for years. This is a warning shot. Against you through me. The reality settled heavy in my chest. Exactly what you were afraid of. Yes. His hands found mine, gripping tight. Which means we need to adapt our security. I'm assigning you a detail. James. This is non-negotiable, Kate. His eyes held mine. You told me we're partners. Partners protect each other. That means you accept protection even when it's inconvenient or uncomfortable. Understood? I wanted to argue. Wanted to insist I could handle myself, that bodyguards were excessive, that this would disrupt my entire life. But looking at his face, seeing genuine fear beneath the fury, I couldn't. Understood. The security detail materialized the next day. 2 professionals, a man named Marcus and a woman named Rachel, who maintained discreet distance while ensuring I was never truly alone. They accompanied me to the office, to meetings, to coffee with friends. Their presence was simultaneously reassuring and suffocating. I feel like a mafia princess in a movie, I told James one evening, watching Rachel stationed casually near the penthouse entrance. Except, I didn't sign up for this role. You signed up the moment you moved in with me. His arms came around me from behind, chin resting on my shoulder. I know it's difficult, But the alternative is you being vulnerable, and I can't accept that. The alternative is me living my life without being constantly monitored. Kate. He turned me to face him. The Mitchells don't make empty threats. Blackwood's call was a warning that they're watching you, looking for opportunities. Until we resolve this situation, security isn't optional. And how do we resolve it? What does that even mean? It means I meet with the Mitchells, establish clear boundaries, make it unequivocally clear that touching you means war they can't afford. His expression was grim. It means reinforcing what I established at that gala months ago, that you're mine, and anyone who harms you answers to me. The possessive declaration should have bothered me. Instead, it made something fierce and warm bloom in my chest, because beneath the territorial language was genuine fear for my safety. Love expressed through the only vocabulary James's world understood. The meeting with the Mitchells happened 2 weeks later. James wanted me nowhere near it, but I'd insisted on the same argument as before. If I was truly his partner, I needed to understand these situations fully. The compromise was that I'd stay at the penthouse with Marcus and Rachel, while James met with Mitchell leadership at a neutral location. I spent those hours pacing the living room, jumping at every notification on my phone, imagining worst-case scenarios. When James finally returned at midnight, exhausted but unharmed, relief flooded through me so intensely I nearly collapsed. "It's handled." He pulled me into his arms, holding tight. The Mitchells backed off. "Agreed to respect our territory and leave you alone." "What did you promise them?" "Access to certain European shipping routes I've been developing. It was worth the concession to ensure your safety." His hand cupped my face. "You're worth any concession, Kate." I wanted to believe it was over, wanted to accept his reassurance and move forward. But something in his expression suggested complications he wasn't sharing. "What else?" I pulled back to study his face. "There's something you're not telling me." James was silent for a long moment, internal war visible in his eyes. Then he sighed, leading me to the sofa. "The Mitchells agreed to leave you alone, but they made it clear they see my relationship with you as weakness, evidence that I've gone soft, that I'm prioritizing personal attachments over business. Other families will see it the same way, which means I need to demonstrate strength elsewhere, be more aggressive in other negotiations, show that protecting you doesn't mean I'm vulnerable. You mean become more dangerous to prove you're still dangerous." The reality was bitter. "I've made you a target too, in a different way." "No." His hand found mine, lacing our fingers together. "You've given me something worth protecting. There's a difference. Before you, I had nothing to lose except business interests and reputation. Now I have something infinitely more valuable. That doesn't make me weak. It makes me more careful and more ruthless about eliminating threats." The logic was twisted, but somehow made sense within James's world. I was both his greatest vulnerability and his motivation for being uncompromising. The thing that could destroy him, and the thing worth destroying others to protect. "I don't know if I can live like this," the confession escaped quietly. "Always wondering if loving you puts you at risk or puts me at risk. Always calculating security implications instead of just existing." "I know." He pulled me against his chest, and I felt his heartbeat steady beneath my ear. "But I also know I'm not letting you go. So we figure out how to navigate this together. How to build a life that acknowledges the dangers without being consumed by them. How to love each other despite the complications rather than because they don't exist." I tilted my head back to look at him. "You've never said that before." "Said what?" "That you love me." His expression softened into something vulnerable and unguarded. "I've loved you since you walked into that gala and called me out for jealousy in front of everyone. Maybe even before. I just didn't have the language to admit it until now. I love you too." The words felt simultaneously enormous and insufficient. Even though you're impossible and dangerous and your world is insane. His laugh was soft. Especially because of those things, I suspect. You don't do anything the easy way, Kate Roberts. Neither do you, James Wilson. We sat there in the quiet penthouse, holding each other, as the city glittered below. Tomorrow would bring new complications, new threats, new negotiations. But tonight, we had this. The certainty of love acknowledged, the fragile security of being together despite everything trying to pull us apart. It would have to be enough. The first snowfall of December came early, transforming Manhattan into something softer, cleaner, almost innocent. I stood at the penthouse windows watching it drift down past glass towers, my hand unconsciously resting on my still flat stomach. 8 weeks. That's how long I'd known about the pregnancy without telling James. It wasn't that I didn't want to tell him. It was that telling him would make it irrevocably real, would force decisions we weren't ready for, would introduce new vulnerabilities into a relationship already complicated by danger and obligation. So I'd kept the secret close, attending doctor appointments during work hours, hiding morning sickness behind excuses about bad coffee, waiting for the right moment that never seemed to arrive. You're thinking loud again. James's arms came around me from behind, his chin settling on my shoulder. Wanna share? Just watching the snow. The lie felt heavier than usual. It's beautiful. It's cold and wet and makes traffic impossible. But his tone was affectionate. You're the only person I know who gets poetic about weather. I turned in his arms, studying his face. 10 months since that gala where everything changed. 10 months of building this improbable life together. Navigating his dangerous world, defending our relationship against threats both external and internal. Learning how to love someone whose existence defied simple categorization. James, I need to tell you something. His expression immediately sharpened, reading tension I couldn't quite hide. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. At least, I don't think anything's wrong. It's just... The words caught in my throat. How did you tell a man who lived perpetually on guard that he was going to be a father? That you'd created something infinitely vulnerable in a world defined by danger? My phone buzzed before I could find the language. Then James's buzzed. Then again, the urgent insistence that meant crisis. James grabbed his phone, his expression transforming as he read. Christopher Evans is dead. Murdered last night. His family is claiming Wilson Enterprises was responsible. Cold flooded through me. Were you? No. His eyes met mine. But someone wants it to look like we were. This is a setup, Kate. Someone's trying to start a war. The next hours blurred into controlled chaos. James made calls, gathered intelligence, assembled his core advisors. I listened from the edge of the room as details emerged. Evans had been killed in his own home, execution style, with evidence planted suggesting Wilson Enterprises' involvement. The Evans family was demanding retribution. Other families were picking sides, seeing opportunity in the conflict. They'll come after you. Christopher Bennett, James's head of security and closest advisor, stated it as fact rather than possibility. You're the obvious target for retaliation. Evan's younger brother Thomas is already making threats. Then we increase security. James's voice was deadly calm. Kate doesn't leave the penthouse without full detail. We secure all known vulnerabilities. Or I disappear for a while. The suggestion escaped before I fully formed it. Leave New York until this blows over. Remove myself as a target. No. The single word carried absolute finality. Running makes you look vulnerable. Makes me look weak. We don't run. James. No, Kate. He crossed the room to me, his hands on my shoulders. I promise to protect you. That means keeping you close where I can ensure your safety, not sending you away where I can't control the variables. This isn't about control. Yes, it is. His eyes were fierce. It's about me refusing to let anyone threaten what's mine. It's about standing our ground instead of giving them the satisfaction of making us afraid. It's about showing every family watching that Wilson Enterprises doesn't back down. The possessive declaration should have alarmed me. Instead, it made the secret I'd been keeping suddenly unbearable. I'm pregnant. The words dropped into the charged silence like an explosion. James froze, his hands still on my shoulders, his expression cycling through shock, disbelief, and something that might have been terror. What? 8 weeks. My voice was steadier than I felt. I've known for 3 weeks. I was trying to find the right time to tell you, but there never seemed to be a right time. And now someone's murdered Christopher Evans and framed you for it, and your world is imploding, and... He kissed me. Cut off my spiraling explanation with his mouth on mine, fierce and claiming. When we broke apart, his forehead pressed against mine, his breathing ragged. You're pregnant. Testing the words. We're having a baby. Yes. I searched his face for the reaction beneath shock. I know this is terrible timing. I know it makes me an even bigger target. I know it complicates everything. It's perfect. His hands moved to frame my face, thumbs brushing my cheekbones. Terrifying and impossible and absolutely perfect. James, did you hear the part about terrible timing? Someone just framed you for murder. There's going to be a war. This is possibly the worst moment in history to be pregnant with your child. Or the best. His smile was small but genuine. Because now I have 2 people worth fighting for instead of 1. 2 reasons to end this quickly and decisively rather than letting it drag out. I wanted to argue with his logic, point out that pregnancy made me vulnerable rather than strong. But looking at his face, seeing joy mixed with determination, mixed with fierce protectiveness, I couldn't find the words. We need to move you somewhere more secure. Christopher Bennett's voice interrupted our moment. The penthouse is defensible but not ideal for extended siege. Agreed. James's arm came around my waist, pulling me against his side. The Connecticut property, full security team, medical staff on standby given Kate's condition. I'm not an invalid, I protested. Being pregnant doesn't mean I need medical staff hovering. It means you're carrying something infinitely precious in a situation where stress and danger are constants. James's tone left no room for argument. We're not taking chances, Kate. Not with this. The Connecticut property turned out to be an estate an hour outside the city. Sprawling, isolated, surrounded by security measures both visible and concealed. James moved us there within 24 hours, establishing a war room in the main house, while keeping me in a guest cottage that felt more like a luxury prison. I spent the first week pacing, restless and frustrated, watching through windows as James conducted strategy sessions I wasn't permitted to attend. My security detail had tripled. Rachel and Marcus now had reinforcements, ensuring I was never alone, never unguarded, never allowed to forget that I was a target worth protecting. This is insane, I told James when he finally came to the cottage late one evening, exhausted from hours of negotiation. I'm going crazy here. I can't work. I can't help. I'm just sitting in comfortable imprisonment waiting for you to resolve a crisis I'm apparently too delicate to assist with. You're carrying our child in the middle of a war someone engineered specifically to create chaos. He pulled me into his arms, and I felt the tension vibrating through his frame. Forgive me if I'm being overprotective. Overprotective is monitoring my phone. This is something else entirely. I pulled back to look at him. Partners, remember? Complete honesty, complete trust. That was our deal. The deal was made before someone framed me for murder and put a target on your back. His jaw tightened. Everything's different now. Nothing's different. The danger was always there. We just have more concrete evidence of it. I moved to the windows, looking out at the estate grounds. You can't protect me from your world by hiding me from it, James. That was never going to work. Then what do you want? I want to help. I turned to face him. I want to use my skills to analyze this situation and find weaknesses. I want to be part of the solution instead of the problem you need to manage. I want to be your partner instead of your possession. Something shifted in his expression. You think that's how I see you? As a possession? I think you love me. I chose my words carefully. But I also think you define protection as control, as removing variables and eliminating threats, and keeping me locked in a beautiful cage where nothing can touch me. And while I appreciate the sentiment, I can't live like that. The silence stretched between us, heavy with truths we'd been avoiding for months. Outside, snow had started falling again, obscuring the grounds in white. I'm terrified. The confession came out rough. Of losing you. Of failing to protect you and our child. Of making a mistake that cost me everything that matters. So yes, I'm trying to control the situation because control is all I know. It's how I've survived in this world. But you're right. You're not a problem to be managed. You're the woman I love, and you deserve better than to be hidden away like something fragile. I crossed to him, taking his hands in mine. Then let me help. Let me be part of this. All right. He exhaled slowly, surrendering control with visible effort. But on my terms. You work from here, not the main house. You have full security detail at all times. And if the situation escalates, if threats become immediate, you follow Christopher's instructions without argument. Those are my conditions. Deal. Relief flooded through me. Now tell me everything about Evan's murder and who benefits from framing you. We spent the next 3 hours reviewing evidence, analyzing patterns, identifying players who might have engineered the setup. My strategic analysis skills, unused for weeks, kicked in with relief as I mapped connections and motivations. By midnight, we'd developed a theory. The Mitchell family, still resentful of concessions James had forced months ago, had orchestrated Evan's death to both eliminate a competitor and destabilize Wilson's position. It's elegant in a twisted way, I said, studying the diagram we'd created. They remove Evans, frame you, and then step in as peacemakers when both families are weakened by conflict. They gain territory without firing a shot, which means we need proof before accusing them. James rubbed his eyes, exhaustion evident, and proof is difficult when they've had time to cover their tracks. Not impossible, though. An idea was forming. The Mitchell family has a logistics operation in New Jersey. I reviewed their financial records months ago when we were considering a partnership. They have patterns, specific contractors they use, specific routes they prefer. If they orchestrated this, there will be traces in those patterns, anomalies in the days leading up to Evan's death. James's expression sharpened. Can you find those traces? Give me access to the right databases in 3 days. I'll find them. It took 4 days rather than 3, working late into the nights, while James coordinated with allies and managed increasingly hostile negotiations with the Evans family. But I found what we needed. Payments to a contractor with connections to Evans' security team, travel records showing Mitchell operatives in New York the week of the murder, communication patterns that revealed coordination timing. The proof wasn't absolute, but it was substantial. Enough to cast serious doubt on Wilson Enterprises' involvement and shift attention to the actual orchestrators. James presented the evidence at a meeting of family heads, with me listening via secure video feed from Connecticut. I watched as calculations shifted, as alliances reformed, as the Mitchell family found themselves suddenly isolated and defensive. By the time the meeting concluded, war had been averted. The Mitchells faced consequences from multiple families for their manipulation, and James's position, rather than being weakened by Evan's death, had actually strengthened through his handling of the crisis. We did it. James's voice came through my phone hours later as he drove back to Connecticut. You did it, actually. Your analysis broke the case. We're partners. I smiled, exhausted but satisfied. That's how this works. That night, when James finally returned to the cottage, he pulled me into his arms with desperate relief. I was wrong, he said quietly. About protecting you through isolation. About trying to handle everything myself. You were right. We're stronger together than apart. I know. I kissed him softly. But I appreciate you admitting it. His hand moved to rest on my stomach, still flat, but carrying our future. I promise to do better, to trust you, to let you be part of this world rather than hiding you from it. Our child deserves parents who are genuine partners, not a father who controls, and a mother who's controlled. Our child deserves parents who love each other. I covered his hand with mine. Everything else we'll figure out together. 3 months later, when my pregnancy was obvious and beautiful, James proposed properly, not with demands or possession, but with a question. Down on one knee in the penthouse where we'd built our life, he asked me to marry him. To be his wife, his partner, his equal in all things. I said yes without hesitation. Our wedding 6 months later was small and private, held at the Connecticut estate with only our closest people present. I wore a simple dress, carried flowers from the estate gardens, and spoke vows that promised partnership and love rather than obedience and protection. When James's voice broke during his vows, when tears tracked down his face as he promised to love me and our daughter equally, to be worthy of the trust we'd placed in him, I knew we'd found something rare. Love that existed despite impossible odds. A relationship built on honesty and trust, rather than control and possession. A future neither of us had expected, but both of us had chosen. Our daughter was born on a cold February morning, perfect and screaming, and absolutely ours. James held her with such gentleness, such awe, that I fell in love with him all over again. Watching him transform from the cold businessman I'd interviewed to the father crying over our child, I knew we'd done something extraordinary. We'd built real love in a world defined by power. We'd created family from impossible circumstances. We'd chosen each other, repeatedly, despite every reason to walk away. It wasn't the simple love story I'd once imagined for myself, but it was ours, messy and complicated, and absolutely worth every difficult choice that had brought us here. From that first possessive claim in a crowded ballroom to tears on our wedding day, Kate and James proved that real love isn't about control. It's about choosing partnership despite every impossible obstacle. Their journey from boss and assistant to husband and wife, from dangerous secrets to vulnerable honesty, reminds us that the most powerful thing we can offer someone is complete trust. If this story moved you, please click like to help others discover it. What would you have done in Kate's position when James first claimed you publicly, accepted his protection, or demanded your independence first? Share your thoughts in the comments below.